April 1945, a month of endings. Berlin, the scarred capital of the Third Reich, braces for its last stand. The Red Army, fueled by vengeance, has reached the city's outskirts. The Nazi war machine, once terrorizing Europe, now faces its final challenge. The world holds its breath. The Red Army, hardened by years of war, seeks revenge. Berlin, the heart of the Nazi beast, will be the stage for this final act. German defenders, a mix of veterans and young boys, prepare for the inevitable. They are the last line of defense for a collapsing regime. The fate of nations hangs in the balance. Berlin is a city transformed, once vibrant, now a skeletal husk, a testament to war's savagery. Citizens huddle in cellars, faces etched with fear. Rumors of Soviet atrocities spread panic. Nazi propaganda speaks of resilience, but few believe. As the sun sets, a deathly silence descends. The calm before the storm. On the horizon, the Red Army gathers. Come dawn, the final battle for Berlin will begin. Darkness envelops Berlin. A storm of steel and fire approaches. The Red Army, poised to unleash its final fury. Over 2.5 million men driven by revenge, ready to strike. Veterans of countless battles, scarred by horrors, stand on the cusp of history. A battle of men and machines, a clash of industrial might. 6,000 tanks rumble forward, eager for battle. Overhead, 7,500 aircraft, wings heavy with bombs. The final blow to the Nazi war machine is imminent. The world watches as history unfolds. At the helm, Marshal Georgy Zhukov, a legend in his own time, entrusted with capturing Berlin and defeating Nazi Germany. Zhukov's bold plan, a massive three-pronged assault. The first Belarusian front strikes from the east. The second Belarusian front advances from the north. The first Ukrainian front encircles from the southeast. The Germans, outnumbered and demoralized, face their doom. The final act of the war begins. The Seelow Heights, a formidable obstacle. Germans constructed heavily fortified lines bristling with defenses. General Gotthard Heinrici, a skilled tactician, defends the heights. Dawn breaks on April 16, 1945, with a thunderous Soviet barrage. The earth trembles, air crackles, and smoke rises. Hours of bombardment transform the heights into devastation. Trenches collapse, bunkers pulverized, trees splintered. German defenders endure a terrifying ordeal. The stage is set for a brutal confrontation. The artillery barrage crescendos. Soviet infantry surges forward. They advance across the shattered landscape, faces grim with determination. Met with a hail of machine gun fire and mortar shells, German defenders fight with desperation, knowing their fate hangs in the balance. Despite fierce resistance, the Soviet advance is relentless. Tanks rumble forward, guns blazing, crushing enemy positions. The ground trembles, air filled with the roar of battle. Hours of chaotic, brutal struggle for every inch of ground. Soviet soldiers, driven by ideology and revenge, fight with disregard for their lives. The battle rages on, a deadly symphony of destruction. As the sun sets, the Seelow Heights become a nightmarish landscape. Bodies of the fallen litter the ground, faces frozen in terror. Burning tanks cast an eerie glow, air thick with the stench of death. Medics tend to the wounded, but for many there is no hope. German soldiers fight on with desperate fury, hope fading. The tide of battle turns, Soviet forces gain the upper hand. Darkness falls, sounds of battle subside, replaced by groans of the wounded. The Seelow Heights, captured at a terrible cost, mark a turning point. Victory at Seelow Heights opens the gateway to Berlin. Zhukov orders his forces to press the attack, maintaining momentum. Soviet tanks lead the way, followed by infantry and guns. German resistance, though sporadic, remains fierce. Panzerfaust armed Volkssturm units ambush Soviet tanks. SS units fight with suicidal ferocity, knowing defeat means death. Civilians trapped in the city face terror and despair. Food and water run low. Disease spreads through bomb shelters. By April 25th, the Red Army tightens its grip on Berlin. The German capital, a besieged fortress, faces its final hours. Zhukov's forces surge forward, marked by tanks and artillery. Rokossovsky's troops reach the city limits, red banners fluttering. Kornev's men complete the encirclement, cutting off escape routes. Inside the city, chaos reigns. Refugees throng the streets, buildings burn, skeletal remains cast an eerie glow. The air thick with smoke, a constant reminder of death and destruction. German defenses crumble further with each passing hour. Ammunition low, food supplies dwindling, medical supplies stretched thin. Defenders fight with desperation, knowing their doom is near. In the Tiergarten, tanks and anti-tank guns duel amidst ruins. In the Reichstag, SS troops transform the building into a fortress. Scenes of surrender and despair multiply. Streets of Berlin, a macabre parade of death and destruction. Civilians caught in the crossfire, lives extinguished in an instant. Deep beneath the Chancellery Gardens in the Führer bunker, Adolf Hitler clung to the remnants of his sanity. Surrounded by his dwindling inner circle, he pored over maps and issued orders that were no longer obeyed. The man who once held Europe's fate was now a prisoner in his own bunker. The Red Army was closing in, their artillery fire shaking the bunker walls. But Hitler, warped by paranoia, refused to listen. On April 29th, Hitler married Eva Braun in a brief ceremony. That same day, he dictated his last will and testament. He distributed cyanide capsules and ordered his body to be burned after his death. As the Red Army tightened its grip on Berlin, the city transformed into a hellscape. Relentless bombardment turned buildings into smoldering pyres and reduced streets to rubble. The air, thick with smoke and the stench of explosives, cast an eerie pall over the city. Civilians endured a nightmare, trapped in cellars and makeshift shelters. Mothers clutched their children, whispering desperate prayers for safety. Food and water became scarce, and venturing out was perilous. Overcrowded hospitals overflowed with the wounded and dying, trapped in a city slowly crushed by war. As the battle raged on, Berlin transformed into a city of ghosts. Gone were the bustling crowds, the laughter of children, the clatter of trams along Unter den Linden. In their place was an eerie silence, punctuated only by the rumble of tanks, the crackle of gunfire, and the distant screams of the wounded. The streets, once teeming with life, were now deserted, littered with rubble and debris, patrolled only by stray dogs and battle-hardened soldiers. Those civilians who remained emerged from their shelters, blinking in the harsh daylight, their faces ghostly pale, their bodies gaunt from hunger and exhaustion. They moved through the ruined streets like specters, their eyes wide with fear, their voices hushed whispers in the shattered silence. They scavenged for food and water, their movements furtive and desperate, their eyes constantly scanning the skies for signs of enemy aircraft. The once familiar landmarks of the city, now reduced to rubble, took on a spectral quality in the smoke-filled air. The Brandenburg Gate, its once proud archway chipped and scarred by bullets, stood as a silent sentinel over a city in its death throes. The Reichstag, its dome shattered, its walls pockmarked by shellfire, bore mute witness to the final act of the Nazi regime. As night fell, the city descended into a darkness even more profound. The glow of fires, burning unchecked throughout the city, cast flickering shadows that danced across the rubble, creating the illusion of movement in the stillness. The stars, normally obscured by the city's lights, shone with an unnerving clarity, their cold, distant light offering little comfort to those trapped below. In the chaos and brutality of the battle for Berlin, amidst the rubble and the bloodshed, a darker truth emerged. As the Red Army advanced, stories began to circulate of atrocities committed against the civilian population. These were not tales whispered in hushed tones, but accounts from eyewitnesses, victims who had seen the face of evil and lived to tell the tale. There were stories of mass rapes perpetrated by Soviet soldiers drunk on victory and fueled by a thirst for revenge. Women, young and old, were dragged from their homes, their screams echoing through the shattered streets, their pleas for mercy ignored. Those who resisted were beaten, shot, or simply left to die, their bodies discarded amongst the rubble like so much refuse. There were stories of looting and wanton destruction, of homes ransacked, shops plundered, and cultural treasures stolen or destroyed. The Red Army, hailed as liberators by some, were seen by others as conquerors, their arrival heralding not freedom, but a different kind of oppression. These atrocities, though often overshadowed by the larger narrative of the war, left an indelible stain on the collective memory of Berlin. They served as a grim reminder that even in victory, even in the pursuit of a just cause, the line between good and evil could be terrifyingly thin. For the victims, the physical and emotional scars of these crimes would linger long after the guns had fallen silent, a constant reminder of the horrors they had endured, a heavy burden to carry in the long years of rebuilding that lay ahead. April 30th, 1945, a day etched in history, a day that marked the beginning of the end for the Nazi regime. As the Red Army closed in on the heart of Berlin, their guns thundering a death knell for the Third Reich, Adolf Hitler made his final, desperate choice. Deep within the bowels of the Führer bunker, hidden from the inferno raging above, Hitler gathered his remaining staff. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the sound of distant explosions and the frantic clatter of typewriters. The faces of those present were ashen, their eyes reflecting the fear and uncertainty that gripped the bunker. The news from the front was catastrophic. The Red Army was now within a few hundred meters of the bunker, their tanks and infantry crushing the last vestiges of German resistance. Berlin, once the proud capital of the Third Reich, was now a smoldering ruin, its streets littered with the bodies of the fallen, its air thick with the stench of death and cordite. Hitler, his voice a strained whisper, announced his decision. He would stay in Berlin, his fate inextricably linked to that of the city he had dragged into the abyss. Those who wished to leave could do so. He would not stand in their way. He would remain a martyr to his cause, his name forever linked to the rise and fall of the Third Reich. In the hours that followed, a strange calm descended upon the bunker. Those who had chosen to stay with their Führer made their final preparations, their faces betraying a mixture of fear, resignation, and a strange, unsettling sense of relief. The nightmare was almost over. Eva Braun, her face pale but composed, donned a simple black dress. She had chosen to die alongside the man she loved, their fates intertwined in a final act of defiance against a world that had turned against them. She moved through the bunker with a ghostly grace, her presence both comforting and unsettling. Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, remained a study in contrasts. His voice, normally strident and filled with the fire of fanaticism, was now subdued, almost gentle. He spoke to his staff with an unexpected kindness, thanking them for their loyalty, expressing regret for the path he had chosen. In the afternoon, as the sounds of battle drew closer, Hitler gathered his closest associates for a final time. He shook their hands, his grip surprisingly firm, his eyes filled with a strange, unsettling light. He spoke briefly, his voice barely a whisper, thanking them for their service, expressing his belief that Germany would rise again from the ashes of defeat. As the afternoon wore on, a sense of unreality pervaded the bunker. The world outside, engulfed in fire and chaos, seemed a million miles away. Time itself seemed to slow to a crawl, the minutes stretching into an eternity. The air grew heavy, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were closing in, crushing the last vestiges of hope. As the dust settled over the ruins of Berlin, a new world order began to emerge from the ashes of the old. The Nazi regime, responsible for unimaginable suffering, had been vanquished. The world, weary of war, looked to the future with hope and trepidation. The Battle of Berlin marked the end of an era. Amidst the ruins, there were glimmers of hope. From the ashes, a new Berlin would rise, a testament to hope and determination. The lessons of Berlin extended far beyond Germany. The seeds of the Cold War were sown in the ruins of Berlin.